Whatever happened to the starter home? How come we don't see smaller houses anymore? Especially with a growing problem like this, a growing number of non-family households that earn less than their living wage. In some areas, up to 60% of households are going to be 1 to 2 person household. Yet the average size of the American home is 2,300 square feet, a 92% increase of square footage per person since like the 1950s. In a second, I'm going to show you examples from around my historical neighborhood, as well as some things I've collected from online. Small starter homes and how they could change us. And then I want to go to and explaining why those type of homes don't exist. Before I do, I want to address a criticism I often get when I talk about this. Someone says, wait a second, I live in a 2,300 square foot home and I want a bigger home, not a smaller one. I'm glad it is the way it is. Now, I was recently at a talk where somebody asked, how many of you have lived in a house or an apartment that's less than 800 square feet? And most of the audience raised their hand. Now, if they had asked how many of you aspire to live in a house of 800 square feet or smaller, a much smaller portion would have raised their hand. What this points out is that what is aspirational isn't necessarily essential. You didn't go barefoot until you could finally wear the shoe that fits you and your foot stopped growing. You wore smaller shoes earlier in life. And perhaps in the same way, we should live in smaller houses. So why don't we see small cottages like this one I just walked past? One of the answers is our zoning. Lots of my neighborhood are 50 feet wide and 135 feet long, yet most are zoned for one household. So imagine if you bought this empty lot and you're a contractor trying to maximize your profit. It would be hard to profit on a small $250,000 house if you paid $90,000 for that lot. Instead, to maximize your profit, you're going to build the biggest building possible. Now, if it was legal to say build a duplex, you could build a similar size structure, turn a similar size profit, but double the capability of that yard. Or you could even build a quad with 4 units and live in one yourself. Or you could build a carriage house or a mother-in-law suite or a backyard cottage similar to this, which you rent out to a student. These are all examples from my historical neighborhood. Odds are all these examples played a role somehow in our upbringing. Either us or our parents have used them to get ahead in life. In fact, you can even go larger in historical neighborhoods. In my neighborhood, whenever they go to build an apartment building, people say that apartment buildings are out of scale and out of the character of the historical neighborhood. Then I show them something like this. 12 units, beautifully landscaped in a handsome brick building that most people don't even notice in my neighborhood because of how well it fits in. Whenever I get talking about duplexes and quadplexes, inevitably people say, I do not and I never will want to share a wall with someone. And I don't want to live in a garage behind someone's house. Let me introduce you to cottage court, a small array of buildings on 1 or 2 lots, sharing a common area, and it doesn't have to look any different from the streets. Like this looks like a normal American dream street, except watch this. Look how many units fit on those 2 lots. 11 units right there on that one single lot. If you were a developer and you could sell those 12 individual units for more than you could a single family house, you would probably do that while making each individual unit so much more affordable for someone who wants to get a start in life. So why aren't more of these getting built? Again, it goes back to the zoning. Even in historical neighborhoods like mine, where you can build a smaller ADU or additional dwelling unit behind your house, don't allow for these cottage courts. And when you try to build them within the existing framework, a lot of expensive things become unlocked. Like one in my neighborhood that has 5 units, need to upgrade their irrigation to commercial. Despite the footprint of the collective buildings being the same as a regular house, they had to spend upwards of $100,000 on the drainage for that property. They also had to add fire code to the back unit closest to the alley, which required $11,000 in the sprinkler system. This would usually mean those affordable houses become unaffordable, but in this case, it was a nonprofit with funds from the city that was building it. And while they showed a desirable form of densification, they didn't do so in a sustainable way. So what could we do about it? The type of code that cottage courts and other forms of dense historical housing has to comply with is called the IBC. International Business Code, and that's what unlocks all those unnecessary expenses. But there's a second type of code known as the IRC, the International Residential Code. In Tennessee, they just legalized that these type of things can fall under the IRC rather than the IBC, but your city has to opt in. Now, if you live in Chattanooga, you're gonna have an opportunity to help persuade your city councilors in the near future to opt in. Another thing that keeps this gentle density from being built is being able to subdivide our lots. If you lived in this small cottage and you wanted to build one behind this that accessed in the alley, you would have to fully fund that out of pocket because most banks aren't going to give you a loan for that. But if your lot was able to be split in half, you could get a loan for a new home and you could either sell that to someone or rent it to someone and own a second smaller property. And in doing all of these things, we're not taking away people's options to buy bigger single family homes. Those will still exist. But the value of these smaller homes goes way beyond just giving someone a start early on in life. They might be a great fallback plan for someone going through unexpected midlife challenges, or a way for an elderly person to downsize without losing the social capital by being forced to move out of their neighborhood. It increases income diversity and diversity in general. I'm not saying your neighborhood needs to legalize huge apartment complexes. In fact, one of the best ways to keep your neighborhood from becoming huge apartment complexes is to allow it to develop gently over time. 1 to 2 units in a yard, small, cute cottage courts. It's a win-win for everyone.